principles in terms of the practice. That connect is rarely built, right? So that's again, I think both sides of the world have to reflect on why industry is not getting the most out of the researchers and why researchers are not getting the most out of the industry, right? I think that discussion has to start, and I think that's a good way to sort of look forward.
Yeah, a lot of things were covered already. Just a couple of things. One is, of course, the objective, as was mentioned earlier, the objective of research in academia is very different from the objective of research in the industry. In the academia, there is a premium for major innovations in terms of ideas. So incremental research is strongly discouraged in academia. But for major innovations to take place, you need time. So a paper which is currently under, a revision has been requested of me and my co-authors. We started the work in 2018. So this is the 5th year, and the revision has been requested now. So it takes a lot of time to do academic research. But think of the objective of a corporate entity. They need quick solutions to their problems, right? As a result, the innovation, for example, of whether to have a proceed to checkout button or not is extremely important for them for the objective of the corporate entity, right? And it needs to be done quickly because that's the object. That's what the end purpose of the in corporate is, right? But at the same time, it means that the nature of innovation is slightly different from the nature of innovation that needs to exist in academic research. So that's the one thing that I wanted to mention. The only other thing that I wanted to mention is academic research, by the very nature of it, is open source, right? I write a paper, and at some point, if it is published, the paper is out there for everyone. Ideally, the data is out there for everyone to replicate and investigate and understand implications. But corporate research is not that, right? Even today, you don't know what the Google algorithm is, right? But they are doing cutting-edge research, but that's not for everyone. So this is an extremely important distinction, and of course it serves the purpose in the corporate, and there is a different purpose for academic research.
Yeah, just to add, 2018 you said, the average Indian CEO's tenure is 3.5 years. So that gives the perspective. So Fortune 500 companies in India, 3.5 years. CEO's tenure.
I would like to add one point, because this is an interesting discussion going on, and I'm sure many people would love to know, especially students over here. Research, when you get into a private sector, I can talk of Amazon for example, you are not just a researcher. Your responsibility is not just doing research, you are an equal owner in the business, right? So your research should equally make sense for the business. That's number one. Number two, you are responsible to make sure that your insights are taken ahead and incorporated. Because if you're doing research, like, my team has researchers which generate like 100 insights, but if you're not even utilizing 30% of the insights, then the entire work goes into vain, right? So as researchers, especially, I always talk to my team about ownership, right? Like, if, let's say for example, Rahul who's here, who leads the seller space, if he's doing a research for the seller space, I want to see what is the impact of my research, like what was I able to generate or as a revenue for Amazon, right? So that's one. Second is, every researcher is an influencer and a consultant. You don't need to do research for every topic anybody has requested you, just because we have done years of researches at Amazon, right? We have a repository, we have insights, frustration, that all in all give good idea about what is the general customer behavior like, right? What is the tendency of a customer to react to a certain experience? How should we leverage existing information in the most lucrative way is something that every researcher needs to do. I think that is the takeaway everybody needs to understand that researchers are not just researchers. We need to do a lot of other things to make sure that we're successful in the private sector.
Can I, when a panel begins to agree, it becomes a very boring panel, right? So we must foster some disagreement here in the panel. So can I pose a question? It's just a rhetorical question. So the question is, so suppose you come up with some research insight at Amazon. So there is a public good value to the idea that you've come up with, right? So for example, a competitor company, Flipkart, does not have to invest in the resources to get that insight, or government does not have to invest in to get that insight if Amazon already has it and decides to make it public. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. But most, I'm just thinking how I should answer that question. But you're right. Some of the study, of course, most of our studies are confidential in nature because, of course, of the competition in India, right? And but whatever are published, definitely. I mean, the example that I spoke about, this is something that me and my manager worked upon. She has been, she's shared that in research papers, etc. So whatever we're rolling out, definitely there is a lot to learn, and I feel every UX researcher is a part of the community. We are interrelated to each other. But I totally agree. I mean, if the research is out, there's a lot of learning which could be used interchangeably. For example, many of you would be following Google. Google share out all the trends on regular basis. On yearly basis, they have the search report for different continents. You could understand what do the search trends look like. How is the customer behavior moving? For example, I was reading the search report of Google. One of the insights was Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities are equally technologically savvy as metro cities. We till now at Amazon, even for Google, for example, they want to acquire the next billion customers. We were thinking, oh, maybe the Tier 2, 3 city customers are not that social media friendly, not that app friendly, not that technologically savvy. But look at them using TikTok, using most of the applications. I mean, I am from Jabalpur, from Madhya Pradesh. Every thela, every outlet over there has scan and pay, right? So I think these reports are out there. We do share on a regular basis, but I think we need to do more. I agree, Professor Ritwik, we need to think more about how could we leverage information better between.
So here is a concrete suggestion. So think of generic drugs versus, because the problem is very similar, right? So you come up with an innovation, but I need intellectual property to be able to recover the money that I've spent in developing that drug. So there's a 15-year timeline, and after that, the statutory requirement is that the formula is revealed, right? So can we have a shorter timeline for the innovations that are happening in the private corporate sector, because things move extremely fast in the tech industry, right? So let's say there's a shorter timeline. After 2 years, you're obligated to make the innovation that has been very useful, or all innovations, public, so that smaller companies, governments, NGOs, organizations which have much more limited financial resource, they are able to emulate and implement the strategies that have been developed.
100%.
Can I have Shubhro pitching in with you?
Yeah. So one of the ways it gets done, Ritwik, is when the industry body does some work. So International Spirit and Wine Association of India, contrary to what popular believe, they do lots of study on alcoholism in India. So though as an industry would feel that it's good that all of us turn drunkards, but that's not the case, because they have understood something. If you hold on to your drinks, and if you are a responsible drinker, we're going to live till 70 and give more business to the industry. So they actually go ahead, lobby with the government and say, no, the way you do the business in India, people are drinking on the go, is risky. Your smaller packs, so they finish, they drink more. So teach them how to hold on to a drink. So they do research where they come together and they share the findings. So there's lots of work, and they actually are working with WHO and others So it's some of the things that I also wanted to show how stereotypes get built. Similarly, TRI does lots of work where they talk about telecom practices. However, as you're correctly saying, if it's of a short-term competitive advantage, there are high chances that I won't talk about it as an industry.
I'll go back to... So I'll go back to our original discussion, which is on behavioral economics, or behavioral sciences, behavioral economics, and academia and industry, right? And this is where I go back to the point that it's very difficult to generalize saying this is academia, this is industry, because there are individuals doing research in both these places. So the individual drives and motivations become equally important. I'll take it from my own example, right? So this is, I'm not going to say the specifics, but I was a very early researcher, not in India at that point in time. And I was invited to join a project in which I was going to be the research assistant, actually doing the work. And I had 4 or 5 professors who were sort of supervising that project, right? And I get the brief, and within a couple of days I said, the brief that's given is not correct. I mean, in the sense we should be doing something else to really make the research meaningful, because it was funded by the government. And the first answer from all the professors were, do not worry about it. We'll get the publications, we've got the funding. We will do the research, we'll give them the report, right? So the motivation for them was short term. They were interested in that we have got the funding, we should be able to do the research, get the publication. Their individual objectives are met, right? Because that's what they're going to be sort of evaluated for. You've got the funding, you write publications. Publications are in journals and things like that, right? So I sort of convinced them. It took me 2 months to convince these professors, as a student at that point in time, to say that let's do what is better for the project, because if the project is done better, the publications will come out better and your publications will be cited better, right? So it goes back to the point of ethics again. So I'm not saying they were ethically wrong, but that's the driver, that's the pressure they have, because their focus is, their objective is, how many papers do you publish, right? And for them to go back and ask the agency to change the, the objective of the research was difficult. So I managed to convince them after 2 months of, this is a 3-year project, 2 months went in just convincing them we should revise the objectives. Then we go back to the funding agency, right? So now this is the funding agency of government, where the CEO of the funding agency says, don't worry about it, give us the report. All the government wants is the report is submitted, we tick off, and it's done. Because the CEO's evaluation is given funding, was the project done in time? That's all his objective was, right? So the question again is that it varies of who's doing the research as well, right? What's your drive and how do you want to see it? So if you're driven purely academically and you're driven by the knowledge goals, your goals will be different. If you're driven both in seeing it, making an impact, again you'll have a slightly different objective to it, right? So that's a general point. Again, coming back to that, it's very difficult to generalize, yes, but there's a clear divide in terms of what academia does and what industry does, but there's an interface to be looked at.
Thank you for all those insights, and we can make out that sometimes the drivers for academicians and for corporates is very different, and that is why somewhere we feel that the tie-up between these two will result in many more positives, because if you're doing an intensive research for a long period of time, and we come to certain things, we have to have places where it is fruitfully implemented and we get the appropriate feedback for that. Then only it matches, because if you just take one stream of academics working independently of where it can be implemented, at some point if there's some coordination and coming together would help. Like what Vishal also pointed out, sometimes the research is, if it is funded by somebody, it is time limited, it is, they're more interested in completing rather than how it is going to work or what is the result of that or how it is going to help people is not actually, addressed to that manner.
To add to that, one of my experiences having worked closely with academicians is this, how do you call it, this bias amongst Indian academicians, or I think it stems from people that they don't like money and they don't need money. It's almost like academicians or a teacher are only there for the knowledge. But you do, it's about not liking money, it's about what they do with the money. That's their choice. They might plow it back into more research, but you do need the economic aspect of it. And that's very understated. It's almost like when I talk to academicians, the regulatory is also such that most universities and most other places would not like to encourage their professors and others to go ahead and do consulting work outside. It's almost like the academician's job is only to teach and write papers. I think that's another aspect that slowly and slowly we need to relook at it. And we is to say that, okay, whoever is winning should be seen as also as a contributor and an economic actor, rather than just being a teacher. I think there's an ethical superimposition on this profession. That's something that I want to disrupt.
Okay, at this point, I think this is really an interesting point of conversation and panel discussion. And I know there are some questions which out of this discussion must be there. So we would like to invite some questions for this panel.
Hi, thank you for that really lovely discussion. And I come from straddling 2 or 3 identities myself, one as a designer, one as an academic, and the other as someone who's working in the space of social change. From all of the stuff that you've said, we see intersectional knowledge being created, be it systems thinking with computational thinking to DT, or understanding, influencing, or predicting, which means that you need to have very many multiple skills. And being in the academic space myself, I see that our curriculums or the way we teach really doesn't allow for some of those intersections to happen. So what is the ideal kind of student that should land in an industry? And when is that conversation going to begin between academia and industry? When I mean ideal student, I mean an ideal employee. What is that going to look like in the new world?
I personally don't think ideal student exists. I feel it's a journey. But I understand your question as well. In terms of how the journey should start, I can talk, like I'm a part of the India Experience Group for Amazon. We have started a couple of drives where we are collaborating with a lot of schools and colleges, not only colleges, but schools too, in both metro and tier 2 and 3 cities, where we are trying to at least use our designers and researchers to spread the discipline of research and design, right? Because as far as I was concerned, I had like no clue something like UX research exists in the industry. I think at that time it might not have been so evolved, but research exists, for example, or design exists as a industry. It has like youth scope, right? So I think that is one of the initiatives we have taken as corporates to make sure we are educating people, we are opening up opportunity, and we are also telling them that there are opportunities within Amazon. I think that's one of the things we are trying to do. But in terms of who would be the ideal employee, I would say somebody, I agree, practical knowledge is good, written textbook knowledge is great, but when you come to an industry, when you come to a corporate, you have to unlearn a lot. When you learn, but you unlearn a lot and understand what are the different dynamics that exist. But pretty much I think in terms of what is required, I think most of us have covered that. I hope that answers your question. I'd love to hear from others.
I mean, the way I would look at it, and that's where, I mean, we at IISc are very focused on thinking. I mean, that's where the entire thing is. How do you get them to think the right way, right? It's not, so your learning is going to be continuous. I don't like, I mean, we do use this word and it's quite fashionable now to talk about unlearning. But I disagree with the word of unlearning, right? There can be unlearning in terms of knowledge cannot happen. Once you know, you know. Whether you change what you know, your understanding of that, unlearning can happen in terms of skills, motor skills. If you have learned something the wrong way, unlearn and not do that. But knowledge-wise, there's nothing called unlearning because you keep updating it, right? No, I'm sorry being pedantic about it, but this is something which we use quite often, so I thought I'll make a point on that. I think one of the critical things we try to talk about is your ability to explore and exploit at the same time, right? That's an ability that everyone must have, which is what you know currently, how can you use it at best that you have at the moment. At the same time, you have to recognize that you know very little in this world, and there's lots to learn. So this is where the exploration ability comes, and at the same time, wherever I am at this stage, how do I make the most of it, right? And this discussion has to happen at all levels, right? Faculty has to explain why they teach the way they teach, what is the curriculum, why it is designed the way it is. And many a times we don't help people connect the dots, right? So what is needed really is hand-holding and connecting the dots. And people are smart enough, and we get smart students. It's just them, getting their mindset in the right place, and getting them to learn.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, panel. This question is for Mr. Roy, but others can pitch in as well. So, towards the end of your talk, you had mentioned about the sort of a close-mindedness of academics in collaborating with the industry because their motives are different. So, but don't you realize that the reason why they would want to do that is to maintain, their academic rigor, and more specifically because the ends of both academia and industry are different. Like industry is driven by profit maximization, whereas certain research has to be driven by ethics, by academic ethics, and it should be guided by the same. So, my question to you is like, do academics stand chance of losing their integrity while collaborating with industry in this sense? And I'm not an academician. I'm just a student. So I don't know many cases about it. Like, but you could take Coca-Cola, for example. They've collaborated with researchers to make sure that their the content in their bottles are not affecting consumers. So things like that. So there are several issues that have taken place in the past. So do you see that issue?
So I'll just so R&D. In-house R&D is a separate game where you hire scientists who are working on your content, you're working on it. Amazon has some of the best brains in neuroscience and others. Okay, many of them do that. The closeness is also from the industry part. Your starting point was a close. Academicians are still willing. The industry, the very CEOs or CXOs who have passed out from the IIMs and IITs, they hardly go back to their own professors or invite them to consult. They'll go to the McKinseys and others, of course, because that's how the things have started working, because the timelines don't matter. Coming back to your second question, MIT is a classic example of an entrepreneurial university. In Italy and other, Israel has more number of I think 100,000 scientists. Why? Because there's no demarcation between these two worlds. It's a choice. Ethics is also a very individual. So if it's not about integrity, and that's again, it stems from that, will a teacher or will an academic, a noble profession, okay, lose their ethical moral compasses or if they are seen as an economic actor? We never think about doctors like that. We never think about scientists otherwise work in a pharmaceutical company. Do we think that this chemical scientist or this pharmaceutical giant working will lose? It's a matter of choice. All that I'm saying and all I'm leaving you with is these two worlds can work together. And ethics work both ways. In the recent times, we know what is happening in the world of behavioral economics and science. Well, there are scandals going on. Yeah. Harvard professors, we know what's happening. Same is happening in the corporate world. But that doesn't mean these two worlds can't meet.
Ritvik has a point.
Yeah, but I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit here. You see, we are only talking about organized industry of the scale of Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. But there are micro entrepreneurs in this country. There are small firms in this country. There are MSMEs in this country. Economists often use a tool called randomized control trial. Randomized control trials are implemented in association with a wide range of actors in the society, starting from the government to primary schools, to private schools, to the healthcare system, to MSME small farms. RCTs are widely implemented in association with them. The data is generated, the research is communicated to them. However, it is extremely hard for researchers, and with all due respect, to collaborate with big corporates, right? To be able to conduct an experiment in a big setting, in a big organizational setting. So the openness, we always bash the government, right? But so far as collaboration is concerned, the academia government collaboration is much more existent and much more easy than the collaboration between a corporate and academic.
Also, I'll just sort of try and dispel this notion that there's not the interest from the academic side as well. So in fact, at IISc and many other institutes, right, academics are encouraged to do entrepreneurship, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to play the role in building the society. One part of that is to create wealth in the society, right? So you go to IISc and you'll see a number of faculty involved in entrepreneurial activities. There is consulting happening through the university, and we consult to a number of companies, both government and non-governmental. The only thing you are not allowed to do is consulting individually, because then the system does not have any control on who goes where, right? Because that's where, and that's a systemic requirement, because if you don't, then it becomes free for all. And that becomes very difficult to contain, because individual preferences can create problem for the system, right? But there are mechanisms in place to promote industry-academia collaboration. A lot of that is happening. Yes, it can be much better, and this is where in the industries, it's a question again of awareness. I mean, again, there are certain institutes which brand themselves very well, right? They are very out there, and there are certain institutions that they expect people to know that there's quality out there, right? It's a question again of branding and going out there.
Can we take one last question?
Good morning, all of you. Along with behavioral economics, neuroeconomics is also emerging. So my question is, how much you people use neuroeconomics for the research in behavioral economics, and how much helpful it is?
Well, neuroeconomics is dead, pretty much. There was a time 15 years back, where it seemed to be an emerging area which would offer fundamental insights into economic decision making. But in the last 10 years, the number of research that is produced using neuro techniques have gone down to zero almost in the most influential journals. There's somebody called Ernst Fair, who is in University of Zurich. So he had a research agenda on exploring neuroeconomics, but I don't think that agenda has been very successful.
Yeah, again, so I'll sort of, at least in the context of design and general decision making and neurocognition, there's a bit of work going on. However, all of that remains a question mark, because it's still very early days, and as of now, if you talk to neuroscientists and neurocognition experts, there's a lot of belief in what we are analyzing at the moment, with very little evidence to support that where we are heading with it is how much confidence we have in the results as of now. Having said that, there's a lot of interest, at least in the design community at the moment. There are people working on neurocognition, looking into decision making with regards to mapping neural patterns and things like that. But the big if remains. So I wouldn't say it's there, but I agree with Ritvik that it's a question mark. It's a big question mark at all.